I hope you've had a good day, and I hope you'll enjoy this session. My name is Darryl Plummer, and I'm a Managing Vice President at Gartner and Chief of Research for Cloud Computing. I've been covering cloud computing for quite a while now and dealing with a number of the issues that come up around the subject. What is it? Where is it going? When should you adopt? What should you look out for? And certainly trying to help people understand how this new phenomenon could actually benefit them without having to start over. That's something we hope to talk about a bit here today. Now, I've spent time with people who are very immersed in cloud computing and people who are not really all that interested in technology. I was with my sister's daughter, and she asked me, what are you doing now? What are you covering now? You talk about all these things. And I said, cloud computing. We happen to be outside. She looked at me. She looked up in the sky. She looked back at me, and she said, you made that up. Some days it feels that way, but the reality is it is real. And we're having to deal with that reality more and more as the months go by. Now, I used to be a CIO for the state of Florida, and I know how hard it can be to put some of these overhyped concepts to good use. I'm joined here by some other CIOs, some experts in the industry, who can talk to that issue and discuss it in a way that hopefully will give you value that you can take away. I'd like to introduce the gentlemen who are here with me and then give them each a moment to speak about why they're here and what they're doing. We start here to my left with Trey Chancellor, who is a VP for Enterprise Strategy with Salesforce. Next to him, we have Mr. Mark Foreman, a partner with KPMG, Federal Performance and Technology Advisory Services. Next to him, Mr. Michael Kerwin, CIO, Yahoo. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Sanjay Merchandani, who is SVP and CIO for EMC. A round of applause. Welcome the gentlemen to the stage.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, if we could start off with Trey, just give us a few minutes on what you're thinking around cloud, what you're doing, anything you'd like to say.
Sure. So, started with Salesforce back in 2006 as CIO and was in that role for a couple of years, responsibility around really transforming our own internal IT organization and adopting cloud for all of our operations. And that it wasn't just the normal CRM applications, but it was really the entire business process enablement. And that included order to cash, it included things like Google Apps, it included areas around commissioning and so on. What we learned in this transition, and today we run the majority of our operations in our cloud as well as our other partners in the public cloud space. What we really learned about it was this entire transformation that occurred, not with the technology aspects, but really the people side, the governance, the process, the efficiencies that can drastically be gained by adopting the cloud. And when you take the covers away from that, what it really means is that the abstraction of what it takes to deliver and develop a business, an enterprise business application today, is far different than what it was before. You no longer require the depth of technical expertise, DBAs, Java experts, and so on, but what you really require are business people. So the whole dynamic of our IT organization changed. We don't hire DBAs, we don't hire sysadmins, we hire business expertise and so on. And the gains that we resolved around our governance models, around our project management models and so on are completely different. And what we're experiencing today and what we're working with our customers is basically the playbook to help this transition and this transformation so that all organizations can be and take advantage of the efficiencies that are gained, not only by the technology around cloud, but more or less the governance changes that occur.
There are two things you mentioned there, one people and the other governance. Two very difficult things to deal with.
Right.
So it's something that certainly you're going to have to put a lot of effort in, don't you think?
Absolutely. In fact, I was asked today, what are some of the qualities that you would look for if you were a CEO and you were going to hire a CIO? People person and a business person. And those are really key attributes that you really want to look for because it's going to be the people skills that enable the change management. You've got to find the individuals in your organization that are going to help with this. You're going to have to find and help and manage the careers and show the opportunity. But in the end, what we found is that through this transformation, people are more satisfied in the organization. They feel more empowered in the organization, and they feel that their careers, which is a complete reverse from what we expect from a CIO or from an IT leader, that the cloud is really one of the best things ever for IT.
Great. Mark.
Well, first of all, let me start again by congratulating Casey. You know, most of us in the corporate world work for our shareholders or our employee. Casey works for all of us, and the work she's doing is going to have immense benefit for all of us, and I'll talk a bit about this. I've been a CIO for the federal government with a huge budget, and a CIO for a startup. It's a lot more fun to be CIO for a big company or big organization with a big budget. But I'll tell you a story that essentially lays out the path for the cloud. Back in 2002, we'd put in place a business case process governance for the federal government on IT investments, treating IT as an investment. And the business cases came in. We were buying a lot of ERPs. And we had our weekly staff meeting between the political appointees and the career folks in the Office of Management and Budget. That's like the headquarters organization in the federal government. And during these meetings in budget season, the director of O&B asked anybody getting any brilliant insights, and my team had said, geez, we're spending too much on ERP and HR information systems, billions. And so he did what he normally did. Of course, we expected it. He said, well, put together a memo. I said, yes. He said, let's shut them down. Shut down all the ERP spending in the federal government. There's a shock around the room. We started an initiative saying, let's consolidate all these. We don't need to buy all these ERPs. I mean, shoot, the federal financial managements are set in law. I mean, it's not like any agency has something unique that they're doing in managing their funds. They think it's unique because they have this concept of proprietary accounting, which the Obama administration has turned into transparency movement. Proprietary accounting means they account for in ways that it's hard to figure out what they're doing with the money. And transparency means they don't get to do that anymore. So anyway, several years into this, and still not much change in the federal buying behavior. We created the financial management line of business. There's a lot of movement to integrate end-to-end processes around, in the federal government, we call it procure to pay. Typically call that order to cash in the commercial world as the opposite for that. But I left in 2003 and went to a startup, and one of my roles was the CIO at the startup. And we were a very well-capitalized startup, blowing through several tens of millions of dollars a year. So we wanted a first-class ERP. We did our evaluation, our business case, and found a cloud ERP. It took us 1 month to implement it. We got it fully operational in 2 months, fraction of the cost of the client-server application. And therein we have the difference between the client-server world and the cloud computing world. So we think about the concept of cloud, and I do very much agree with the NIST definition. There's infrastructure as a service, and for point of controversy, I'll say that's a transitional state. There's platform as a service and software as a service. Software as a service in its transitional state is essentially taking client-server and offering that up in a different model. That's going to morph to end-to-end business processes, the procure to pay, the order, the cash. So the federal government has recently said we're going to shut down again all our ERP implementations. And instead, we're going to wait to see what happens with the cloud. But in the meanwhile, we're going to go out for having all invoices, all bill presentment to us in the cloud. And they said that without even knowing that there's already an invoicecloud.com, a cloudinvoice.com, Esker that offers the same processes. So business processes are moving to the web. I believe that's the future of software as a service. And the third area is platform as a service. And I think that we're going to see tremendous commoditization in core business processes. That's going to stay in the platform in the software as a service space. But in the platform and the service space, that's where we'll see the innovation. When we talk about collaboration, we talk about concepts such as the open source movement applied to problem solving, innovation, whether it's applications development or creating that community of practitioners that's going to solve the public policy problems of tomorrow. We can't rely anymore on a few people to solve these complex problems operating in their legacy silos of information and their segmented views of the world. We learned that with 9/11, we learned that with Katrina, we learned that even more recently with the financial crisis, the Christmas Day bomber. These silos have to come down. And at the heart of that is some of the innovation we're seeing with the Obama administration and the platform as a service model.
Great. Now, big company, big business, big risks in the cloud, yes?
I think actually these are exactly the same risks. I was in the congressional staff overhauling management laws in the 90s, and we said the exact same things in the early days of the web. So the market is very focused on this, and I think, again, the Obama administration is leading the way. If they can secure the cloud apps and they go to commercial cloud apps through software as a service model, I encourage you, if you haven't, take a look at apps.gov, take a look at FedRAMP, and you'll see that you're probably going to get, within the US IT industry and the US economy, access to more secure applications than anywhere in the world. This is not just improving the quality of our government. This is making us globally competitive.
Excellent. Let's move on to Michael.
Okay, so Yahoo was an early adopter of cloud. It was done primarily because of scale. We operate our own private infrastructure, and really the move to cloud was somewhat obvious. Delivering the content to half the world's population for email, photos through Flickr. We were dealing with somewhere between 350 and 400,000 servers globally, with tens of petabytes of data being to live up to the customer requirement of instant on, instant delivery meant that we had to have a highly distributed network. So we embraced the private cloud. We also are a significant contributor to open source for the cloud. We believe that it's available for everybody. We use our own distribution of Hadoop for storage and for elastic storage, and again that's open source through the Apache Foundation. It enables us though to be able to process tens of petabytes of data. When you go to say the Yahoo main page, sometimes you'll see that it'll be customized for what you're looking for. You do a search, or you look up some news article. Especially if you do a search, you might see some custom adverts that come across. So that is again a significant challenge, because we serve up probably close to 10 billion unique adverts a day. So that infrastructure needs to be highly available. And we found not only making it highly distributed out in the cloud, it provides us with significant availability opportunities. We're up in the high number of nines. But the other benefit, which was sort of, it really wasn't the burning goal, but it turns out to be the highly distributed processing enables to significantly reduce our data footprint size, our carbon footprint, as well as significantly reducing our utility bills. So it was a double whammy for us.
Cost effectiveness, efficiency leads to new opportunity.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And lastly, Sanjay?
Sure. So I'm with EMC, and we're just down the road from here. And our journey into the cloud has been really around a combination of the private cloud as well as the public cloud element. So we're a customer of Salesforce.com as an example. Our journey began 4 or 5 years ago, where through years of growth as well as acquisitions, we were running out of essentially data center space and the traditional problems that we had with space and overall data center usage. So we were always, traditionally 100% allocated and 30% utilized, and if I could go that way. And so, classic problems, and we looked at virtualization, information lifecycle management through our storage optimization, and basic data center blocking and tackling to get us across what at that point was a capital expenditure we didn't really want to embark upon at that point. Fast forward, that phase was sort of more traditionally what we call IT production. We took the low-hanging fruit, file print servers, things like that, virtualized those, got some really good benefits, delayed some of the CapEx that we wanted to, building out a new data center, which we had planned, but just later. And then rapidly found ourselves seeing the benefits, both the financial and efficiency benefits evolve into, okay, now we're in mission critical, business critical applications, so how do we tackle these? And started skinning those applications down and moving them into a virtualized platform. So the journey was really that, and that was sort of what we call business production. And the goal was to get as far down the path on x86-based virtualization as we could to get the benefits of a consistent environment, management tools and roles and things like that. And we wanted to call that IT as a service. So internally, we run as a service. That was the journey that we were on. So it wasn't planned as a private cloud. It turned out to be what we now call the private cloud, but it started out with the underpinnings of 100% virtual infrastructure that we were trying to drive on the storage compute network pools. And we're on that journey. So I'd say we're somewhere between business production and IT as a service. But we're also very opportunistic about applications as a service in the cloud that we can pick from partners that provide the best of breed applications that we then couple into our environment. So that's sort of been our journey. It's more classic in a company of our size, evolving and growing and acquiring companies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Let's get into it a little bit. Free-form discussion. I'll start with something that's interesting. We mentioned the NIST definition and the 3 layers that NIST uses. We'll come into those layers a bit later, but I want to start with 2 different perspectives on the cloud. Some would say cloud computing has been used for better part of a decade or more by consumers, and that corporations or enterprises woke up to the phenomenon in 2008. If that's true, how would you guys characterize the differences? What are the major impact differences or risk differences that would come out from those 2 perspectives? Or are they the same?
I'd say, just my premise on this is that the people think of cloud as something that's a new SKU you go buy. It's really a state you're trying to achieve in your computing environment or your infrastructure. And so I think the technology has evolved in the last couple of years that really allow you to, in the enterprise, to manage it, to get that sort of public cloud scale in the enterprise. That I think that's been a catalyst in the process. But really, it has always been the kind of destination that we've all been hoping to get to. I think the technology has evolved rapidly that allows us to do that.
I think you have to look at the hypervisor as a technology breakthrough that is really catalyzing a lot of this movement. But it's true. I mean, even back in 2001, 2002, Akamai, I noticed, was out front there, and one could easily say that was a great way to deflect security issues for the federal government and a cloud solution to provide increased security. So, I think it's clear that those things were there, the consumer aspects of the clouds, but the difference now is we're starting to see the end of client-server computing and that software application or software acquisition model. We start to seeing the sourcing models evolve. The resistance to that change is often coupled with the concerns about privacy. And I've seen this many times in the federal government. Well, the federal government will never go to the cloud because we got to keep this data private. At the same time, one of the major initiatives is to make the data transparent. I mean, after all, the notion that the bureaucracy should somehow keep hold of your data is kind of like an oxymoron. So I think that's the other recent catalyzing effect, is that the Obama administration, it's not unique to the federal government. You see it in San Francisco, Washington, D.C. You see it in the UK. There's this broad recognition in even the policy arenas that there's a more fundamental, less cost, open way to operate enterprises now. It may have been consumer-led 5 or 10 years ago, but it's clearly moving into the most bureaucratic of enterprises when it hits government.
But when you go into something and bureaucracy takes over, often the value proposition begins to get a little confused there. Is that something we should be worried about at this point?
I think that there needs to be clear innovation and the value proposition from that. Too many things are converging that are catalyzing this. You've got the hypervisor, but you've got this transparency movement. You have a demographic change where people are coming in used to collaborating over the internet, and a whole group of folks that are within 3 years, maybe a year and a half of retirement. In government, when I was there 10 years ago, 7 years ago, we had people resisting change because it was threatening to them. Now we have people resisting change because they don't want to change. They're there for a year or a year and a half, but they expect that the people coming up behind them are going to embrace the change. So there's this convergence of forces that I don't know anybody fully understands now.
Let me challenge that for a moment. I speak with a lot of CIOs on a daily basis. I find quite a bit of them really don't want any change and don't want this transparency.
Yeah, I think you do find that mix, but I'll tell you, in government, we're seeing the exact same phenomena that we saw in the 1999-1998 timeframe. The CIOs are losing control of the movement to the cloud. CIOs' governance processes are pretty good around CapEx expenditure. They're not around O&M expenditure. And just like back then, when the federal government and state governments, by bureau, by branch, went out to ISPs to get their IT because it was cheaper, it was outside of the control regimes. We're seeing that now with cloud apps, you know, whether they're software as a service model, infrastructure as a service model. And I'm not sure that we understand the governance processes to make the best sense of it. By the same token, I'm not sure that you could say to somebody who's done that, don't do that, when they can clearly say, but look how much money I'm saving, look how much faster I can get to market, look at how much my productivity can increase. So the governance structures have to morph, and they have not kept up. And where I see the CIOs resisting it, it's where they feel loss of control.
You see the same thing, Salesforce?
Well, you know, we've been around since 1999 and really focused on the enterprise. And what does it take to make an enterprise successful for an enterprise application to be delivered via the cloud or via the service? And that's where we got our roots. I think that maturity has definitely gained, and there's other software as a service providers that have also basically matured over that time. But what
Let me
we've
ask
seen—
you a clarifying question.
Sure.
When you say the enterprise, do you mean the enterprise business unit or the enterprise IT organization?
The business unit. The focus on the business unit, or the focus on the actual organization that satisfies the requirements that a business would have around security, around uptime, around, you know, the governance models and so on that are required. That is our DNA. That's how we were born. We don't serve specifically the consumer market. We were born focused on the enterprise, but we were focused initially around software as a service, our CRM product. What really changed a few years ago was the ability to bring platforms alive. Before that point, it really wasn't all that much focus on IT, because you could go with lines of business. Here's an SFA app for the sales operations person or the business leader. But now the platform is all about IT, because you can build and run any type of enterprise application you want on these platforms. That's a true transformation, because the same tools that our developers had internally at Salesforce to build our CRM and our award-winning SFA apps and all that good stuff, right, now are available to any customer, any ISP, and so on to start building.
So an interesting notion. I want to see how you respond to this. I've been telling this story since it happened. This is a true story. Last September, I was with 50 CIOs, you know, in a room talking about cloud computing. Of those 50, 35 of them said they were using Salesforce applications in their business. Of those 35, none of them picked it. None of them specified it or paid for it. And of those 35, only 2 of them knew it was going to be in production before it went into production. Now, you say you're targeting the enterprise, and the IT is now getting involved with the platform, but these guys are sort of following and saying, what do we do now? The business is leading us around by the nose.
Right. That has to be a transformation, and it's something that Salesforce is very focused on, because the platform is about IT. My role at Salesforce Enterprise Strategy is a new role. It's about our go-to-market strategy of how we interface with CIOs, how we interface both from our product side, our sales side, our marketing side, to make IT successful. Because, you know, again, where we got started, we were selling into lines of business, not into the CIO. The platform is about IT. It's a model that works very well for IT. We're obviously partnering with companies like EMC and VMware to give even more options and capabilities on our platform to enable and develop applications either through, you know, Java or even through our declarative methods.
But Daryl, can I push back on that? The difference here between taking client-server apps, putting them together in a production environment, and buying IT as a service is huge. How many CIOs are investing the knowledge they need to do sourcing, figuring out service level requirements versus user interface requirements, or the applications requirements? The software as a service model, and a lot of the companies like yours know the customers oftentimes better than the CIOs, because you're segmenting into the business processes. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got in the CIO community in understanding this is converting from a governance model built around client-server apps to a sourcing model where we understand service level requirements, we can negotiate service level agreements. It's a different skill set, it's different knowledge. You have to look at essentially blowing up a lot of your infrastructure in that model. You're requiring people to provide you security and X number of nines as you're doing. You know, you're not doing it yourself. So this is part of the transformation for the CIO's role as well.
But there's not, I mean, I'm going to just pick up on something you said. There's nothing wrong with the business actually wanting a solution that we have to help get done. And they couldn't do it without the security and the governance and the integration back into whatever systems we need to integrate into without IT.
That's the trait of a good CIO, though. I mean, a lot of CIOs fail because they don't have that relationship with the business. If they are joined at the hip and the CIO understands what the business needs and the business challenges are, and the business understands what the CIO challenges are, you work together as a team. You don't get led around by the nose by the business because you're one team.
But isn't there always that issue of control versus freedom, where a CIO is saying we're losing control and we're going to be on the outside looking in? You're saying
it depends on how mature the CIO is and the relationship he has with his organization. You know, if I ever thought I was losing control, you know, it was maybe I'm not in the right job. Maybe I need to move on. But it's a collaborative effort.
It is.
Absolutely collaborative. And I think many CIOs fail because they just have not built that collaboration and built the trust within the business to be able to operate together as a trusted service delivery.
Do you see this movement, this cloud computing movement, as one of the biggest new opportunities for CIOs? Or one of the biggest risks?
Well, in its broadest sense, cloud has been around since, what was the name of the vice president that invented the internet? And then you had a number of universities that they had some humongous calculations to get through. And what they did, they made a client available, so every time your home computer went idle, it would run jobs for them. That was years ago. So, you know, in my opinion, cloud's been around, has been around forever. Are there opportunities today? Absolutely. CIOs need to understand where and how it can help the business.
Yep.
And I think that's also another challenge is, and also, what is your definition of the cloud?
We all have probably a different, if we ask everyone in the audience.
I guarantee if everybody raised their hands, you know, if it's this, it's this, it's this, you probably get, you know, 30 different answers. But again, I think it goes back, understanding what the business is and how the business can benefit from, you know, these new technologies.
So there was a lunch session that had an interesting statistic up on the slide that said between last year and this year, CIO spending priorities were, number one was virtualization, number two was cloud. And cloud is up from 22, I think, if I remember the number right, 22 to 2. So I think, you know, in the conversations I have with CIOs, my peer group, is, you know, is that we absolutely want to embrace this as soon as we can because it is a chance to really, I guess the bottom line as I see it from our point of view is agility for the business. You can do things, you can drop functionality, you can drop value onto, you know, what the business needs from you in cycles of time that are unprecedented. And that is the difference, in my opinion, as opposed to being able to, you know, going to the standard old way client-server way of provisioning applications and the usual things you had to do. You're really much more agile, and the business appreciates that, so there's a lot more partnership that you can engage with because they know you're trying to get it done in weeks and months as opposed to years and whatever.
Right.
But so far we've been talking about cloud as one nebulous thing. There is public and there's private cloud, right? Does this begin to make a difference to a CIO? Will they avoid public cloud in favor of private cloud? Because I get asked quite often, what's the value of doing cloud privately when you still have to keep all the equipment and everything that goes with it?
I think a couple key thoughts here. You know, as a CIO, I think you got to look at this reduction in transactions cost that's going to occur as more and more of these business processes get commoditized. So we think about the public cloud as this amorphous internet space, and we don't really look at it as where are we processing standard business transactions. Can you compete? If you could get your payments cost cut in half, not what your collections are, but the cost of doing that collection cut in half, would you do that? And I think we're in part back to where we were in the 90s, where the business was basically disintermediating the CIO or creating problem IT projects because somebody would see something on an airplane magazine and they'd come back and they'd go buy it. And so now I think part of the role of the CIO has to be to figure out where do we disintermediate the client-server apps, because there's really not that much unique. The apps are commoditizing in the public cloud, in the software as a service. I think the other challenge for the CIO is in this platform as a service model, because that's where the innovation, the collaboration, and the community, the emerging consumerism is forming around groups where you engage your customers in developing products or in solving your problems. This is huge for government. I mean, no one employee of the government, I will guarantee you, understands all the aspects of the policy issue they're trying to solve. And yet they're all uncomfortable on how they engage to do that. If a government CIO can facilitate that engagement with the public by providing that data, the data.gov example, that's huge for how we work as a country.
But that sounds like an argument in favor of using the public cloud to get value over doing it all internally.
That's right.
So now you would obviously go that way.
I sure would.
I'm wondering if the other guys feel the same way. Now, Michael, you're sort of exempt from this because Yahoo.
Well, not
Yahoo,
really.
right?
I mean, we do have a whole bunch of, we do have the standard, accounting packages, CRM systems that currently don't run in our cloud. So are we looking at some of our internal services to run the cloud? Absolutely. And we've made a tremendous investment in our private cloud. It would be not a good idea for me to walk into the our CEO and say, I'm going to take this outside. What do you mean? We've already invested billions of dollars for our internal cloud. So, but again, it may make sense to go to a public cloud type service.
But how do you manage that when the CEO comes back, or when the board shows up and they say, I was at this other company, they've taken all their billing and they're using Invoice Cloud or one of these companies, and they've cut their cost of billing in half. And a year ago, they approved that however many $1 million investment in your payments process.
So my response to my CEO would be, Oracle Financials is not a core competency for us, so it's going outside. It's not staying inside. And I think that's a lot of areas where a lot of companies, they tend to operate outside of their core competencies, and eventually it gets them into trouble.
By the way, I'm wondering, what did Oracle say when you told them that? Were they happy about it?
Is anybody from Oracle in the room? No? Good.
Okay.
No, but I mean, just to come back to the point, I mean, I'm not going to write a Salesforce automation product, right? It is available. You check the security models, you check the privacy models, you make sure it integrates, you do the compliance pieces. We work together to make sure it fits what we need. But there are things that I'm going to serve up on the compute cycles for R&D, which is what we are, a technology company, that I'm not going to put anywhere but in my virtual data center, i.e. my private cloud. Yeah. And I'm going to serve that up, or demos or whatever environments we need for our business, that you evolve your classic data center into a private cloud. So I don't think it's an either or. I think, and as better applications come up or platforms as a service are available, we will absolutely use them.
But at the same time, you can't run Salesforce applications in a private cloud, right? So you have to make a choice to go to the public cloud for some things if you're not going to write those Salesforce automation apps.
That's what I'm saying. I'd call that a hybrid cloud, where you're going to take some private, some public, best of breed, and you're going to bring them together, and over time there'll be more standards about how you exchange information and data and what have you. Today, you got to do it the hard way, but there are technologies that are evolving that make it easier. And as a CIO, I'd absolutely want to look at best of breed. What we could do in 12 months we had to do some of that stuff ourselves, it would take us ages. And that's not core competence, to your point, right?
Right.
So I think, to your point, it's interesting stat about Salesforce is more than half of the transactions that come into our service are actually API calls. It's not somebody on a web browser doing a transaction. Right. It's actually another system calling ours. So the interoperability in this model of integrating Salesforce, either our platform technology or the applications to the back office system, is absolutely critical, because that starts the process around this transformation of moving functionality from these legacy systems that are not core to our business, and moving that functionality into the cloud so that you can take advantage of all that the public cloud has to offer, whether it's uptime, whether it's security, whether it's disaster recovery, replication, all of those capabilities, and even more importantly, that abstraction that I was talking about. Once you have that application running in the cloud on a cloud computing platform, you can cut down, tear down, destroy those walls between IT and the business. And that is one of the biggest benefits that we've seen, because now you can combine your teams of IT people and business to actually develop applications as opposed to business requirement documents. You know, how novel a concept is it to, to build the actual prototype and the actual application that you're going to use with your business users from day one, as opposed to writing a BRD that's going to take you 4 months and then another 6 months to deliver on that project.
So clearly, if we can do things in a more efficient way, faster, quicker time to market, those kind of things are benefits. But now we've hinted at something here we haven't really mentioned specifically, which is cost savings. We've hinted at that. And there is a general assumption out there that you're going to save money if you do cloud computing. However, when you begin to look into it, it's not as clear cut as one might imagine. A 5-year expenditure on software as a service might actually cost you more money because you're not able to depreciate it. That alone is something that says we have to actually consider the cost savings. Do you guys believe we're really going to achieve cost savings? By the way, that'll be the first time we've ever done it in IT. But do you believe we're really going to achieve these?
Well, okay, that's not the first time. Look, go back to the calculator, right? So I'll tell you, when the federal government switched its buying model from everything development to government spec to buying COTS, was about 10 years after that switch occurred, which I think was in the 80s. But the reality is the cost for government to buy IT was going up, and the cost for industry to buy IT was going down. You know, there are a number of laws that are irrefutable in this space. And the question is, where do we see Schumpeter's laws create the disruptions? So the costs are going to go down, the usage is going to go up, the spending is probably going to go up. No question about that. We commoditize the business processes by automating them. That is a long-term trend in IT. I would expect that we'd spend a lot more on automation of business processes than we're spending today. In the federal government, we can't afford all the money we're spending to reconcile the different data that is essentially the same data, but residing in 3 or 4 different client server systems that you have to reconcile at the end of the year to balance your books. Okay, so we automate that, we spend more money on the computers, we save a heck of a lot of money on the people who aren't really adding value. You know, that's the trade-off we got to look at. We can't just look at the cost reduction in IT.
You feel the same about this, Trey?
Yeah, I think, we do exhaustive cost analysis, return on investment, and so on to model our service. But I think the ability to innovate, the ability to deliver on behalf of the business, the ability to give tools to the business to develop their own applications with the right governance and control structures delivered by IT to ensure that they conform to security and so on and so on. If you don't have that opportunity, and that loss of opportunity means that you become very much an order taker as an IT organization as opposed to a strategic organization. And I don't think any IT group or any business cannot have that in their arsenal to compete today.
So Michael, let me ask you the question, but I want to get an answer from each of you on this. In 10 years, what number would you put on savings for the average IT organization that did cloud computing? Would you put a significant number on that at all?
No. But let me sort of digress and go back to the Yahoo model. The cloud computing has enabled us to significantly reduce our operating costs.
Agreed.
We've managed to do that by, we're building smarter but smaller data centers. So in the traditional, the data center model, you're going to have, let's say, a cluster of servers, 2 front-end servers, 2 back-end servers. They have dual power supplies, and you run it out. They've got 2 PDUs, 2 generators. That's a tremendous amount of infrastructure and overhead. Now, with a highly distributed cloud, you just have 1 commodity server, single power supply source, 1 PDU, and maybe a generator. Because if that node disappears off the cloud, everybody, it's going to get picked up somewhere else. That is a tremendous cost saving in facilities infrastructure, utility cost.
So now I could agree with you that it's an efficiency issue. The question is whether or not it will really turn out to be a savings. Right? Now, you said you believe a significant reduction in operating costs. Now, statistics would suggest that significant is 20%.
Pruning 10 megawatts per hour this year is a significant saving. So without doing anything, just changing our building infrastructure model, we've pruned out 10 megawatts an hour. That's a lot of moolah.
But I think it's more significant though, and I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's not just the IT that we're going to see the cost savings on. I think it's the business processes that become commoditized, where you can leverage economies of scale, and you no longer need to invest in unique client server applications. We're going to see those savings come out in the total cost of that business process. Where we're under-investing today are in the collaborative innovation areas. You could argue that we're over-invested in some BI tools, because in the cloud, we're going to use BI and access data and content totally differently. But what's our budget for content in the corporation? I can tell you the federal government does not have a budget for content creation, and yet we spend a lot on it. That is all going to be the area that's organized. And I don't think we know whether we're going to spend more or less. I think we'll end up spending more on that, and we'll get more productivity out of that. But I believe that we're going to see tremendous growth in spending around collaborative tools, business analytics, innovative product development, collaboration with your customers or your constituents. That's where I think we're going to see the growth in spend.
I love this idea of growth in spending. We tend to find that when you give people unlimited access to something or on-demand access, they consume more of it. Right. That's expected to happen.
If I could, to answer your question around ROI and so on, it's interesting. At Salesforce, we run our production environment, meaning 72,500 customers on less than 2,000 servers. And a shameless plug for my friend from EMC, Sanjay, and EMC on the back end.
You guys want to sit closer together?
That's right. We were going to get in a fight later. But you think about that, 2,000 servers is all it takes to run less than 2,000 servers, 72,500 customers. That economy of scale for cloud producing providers is astronomical. And the way that you're able to push out additional features and new functionality on a rolling basis for us 3 times a year and give that opportunity to customers, I think is incredible return on investment for anyone looking at that.
Absolutely. So we've talked a bit about a hybrid, public and private together. Obviously some benefits that we can, qualify, if not quantify. We're seeing certainly a lot of reasons to do it and some risks, but they can be overcome at this point. Now, I asked about the cost savings because that's one of the top questions we at Gartner get asked by customers. How much am I going to save doing cloud computing? It is more complicated than that. There's another question we get asked every time, and I'm sure that at least 75% of the audience has got this word in their head right now: security in the cloud. Now, I'll tell you, just the caveat, I'm an application developer by birth. That makes me the natural enemy of a security person. But the reality is everybody's talking about security.
Sure.
What's the reality out there in the cloud? Sanjay,
Well, I'm going to, again, I'll parse out public and private for a minute, because some of the responsibility in the public is on the partner that you work with, or the provider you work with, to make sure that you synchronize what you're looking for by way of security policy for your enterprise and compliance, et cetera, with what they provide you and how well you can integrate that. So that's on the when you're engaging with the public cloud. On the private cloud, I sort of smile when we have these conversations, because when you start virtualizing, which is the underpinnings of a private cloud, you're inherently encapsulating more, and you don't forget the basics of what you did in the physical world when you go into the virtual world. You shouldn't anyway. So whether it's whatever authentication, information management, data loss prevention, whatever the tools of the trade are that you use internally to get the job done in the physical world, you don't just completely forget that and move into the, when you go into the virtual world. So you hopefully carry your good habits with you. With virtualization, you can get down to the, everything. You can get down to a very granular level compared to the physical stack that you've had in the past, the client server stack, and so you can really monitor. You can instrument a lot deeper than potentially you could you did in the physical world. So all I'm saying here is that you take your good habits with you. Hopefully, you take the best your practices with you. What does change is governance. So you have to be a lot more careful about, or you have to evolve the governance model on what were well-defined handovers in traditional processes. When you spin up, spin down, access, what have you, you want to make sure you evolve those into, from a GRC point of view, into the virtual world of the private cloud. So I'd say it evolves, but you don't forget everything, and if done right, it could be more secure. Because the levels of encapsulation that virtualization just brings.
Well, now, let me stop for a second. Let me ask the audience. Show of hands, how many people out there believe that cloud computing might be more secure than on-premises computing? Just a show of hands. That's quite a significant number of people.
Yeah.
Quite a significant number. So why are you all asking us about security constantly?
I think you've got to segment public and private. You've got to have the conversation both ways.
I think that's right, and to make virtualization work, I've long thought that you take advantage of things like ITIL. You've got to create that secure image for your production environment, and that's got to be done around standards. But I don't care if it was 5 years ago in the client server environment, or if it's the future web services and software as a service in the cloud. The issue still gets down to what you were saying. Can developers build security into the architecture up front? We know it's always going to be more expensive when you add security on as an afterthought. Now, I'll tell you that I think us and the other big four that do the security audits and certification accreditation, those kind of things for the federal government, see our business booming because the federal government said we're going to buy these cloud apps, we'll buy software as a service, or we'll buy infrastructure as a service, but it's got to be FISMA secure. And I assume most of the people in the audience know the Federal Information Security Management Act sets out these criteria, and NIST establishes the standards, and companies like KPMG go help people meet those standards, or we audit for the government to make sure they're there. Most of that is still going on as putting security on after the fact. The question is, can we build security in at the beginning? And that's one of the reasons I think that the platform as a service model may be the emerging model, because you can lay out what the data standards look like and make the data available to people. You lay out the security standards, and you leverage the open source movement to develop applications consistent with your architecture standards, which include security. So that would be my question. Is the emerging model here the platform as a service model?
Let me ask you a slightly different angle on that, because you mentioned platform as a service. One of the problems that you run into in security is the issue of data. Where is it? Who owns it? If the cloud provider goes out of business, how do you get it back? Or what happened to it? What did they do with it? If they sell themselves to someone else, did they sell your data as part of their assets? And did you want them to do it? Aren't these questions still virtually unanswered?
Well, like I said, I think the CIO's role is shifting, and we have to understand the service level agreement and service level requirement elements. These are all valid questions, but they're all answerable, right? I mean, you negotiate that. This is a contractual relationship.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. You build that into your contract.
Yeah.
They're all answerable. I love that phrase. They're all answerable.
Well, in fact, again, it comes down to the enterprise focus and the requirements that we have around privacy and as well as security. For us, in our platform as a service, Force.com, what we allow customers to do through our bulk API is to download their data anytime they want. They can have it, they can access it, they can put it in their database, they can take all their customizations, all of their integration logic, download that in XML and store that. We can answer the privacy questions because we've been in this market and we know it's a significant concern and it's got to be addressed by IT. On the security side, we live, first of all, there's never a finish line in security, obviously. But we live by what we call the highest common denominator. Because we have 72,000 plus customers, there's very specific requirements that customers like a Merrill Lynch or a Symantec would come to us and say, we need these layers of features of security in your service. When we enable that in our service, it doesn't only pertain to Symantec or Merrill Lynch, it pertains to all 72,000 customers. The convergence of how you can deal with security is much faster in the cloud than in the single tenant architectures.
So if you're better at it than I am, I get the benefit of that, and all 72,000 do.
Right.
Of course, if you make a mistake.
Well, it's crowdsourcing in a sense at that point. So we're not only taking requirements in from customers, but we have a significant presence in terms of our security team that looks at all of this.
So there is one area that, that is concerning, and that's to do with data residency. Would I want to put Yahoo data on, in certain countries? No, I wouldn't, because we would be liable for search and seizure. So, going to the outsourced cloud model, you need to be very careful where your data is going to reside. There are some countries within Europe that, we as Yahoo turn around and say, never there. We're lucky because, we've got, we use our own cloud, so we get to say where our data is actually stored. But with some, some cloud solutions, you need to be aware that you could end up putting some data somewhere that you really don't want it, and then it's been subject to search and seizure.
The Patriot Act.
Exactly.
I mean, Al Gore invented the internet. It took Congress to create the Patriot Act.
Right. But some other European countries and mainland China have really stricter rules than that, and you need to be aware of where stuff is.
Okay, excellent. I want to give the audience a chance to get in on this a little bit. We'll take some questions from the audience. If you have a question, we have 2 microphones down here on the aisles. If you could come to the microphone, I'll take one from each side until we've exhausted your question. Please don't be shy. We might come down and get you ourselves.
I was going to say that.
Come on. First question.
In the issue of security, Lawrence Poster Catalyx Group, which is both an executive search firm and a accelerator with technologies and early stage companies. With respect to security, I've heard in this conference that both distributed systems make things safer and consolidation makes things safer. Now, is this a conflict, or am I misunderstanding something? Would those on the panel that have something to say address that issue?
So federal government's probably answered that.
There are different aspects of the security, and so I think there's a good segue to talk about some of the elements here. So if you're talking about transactions processing, then you got to look at the data in transit and securing that data in transit. And the more distributed points you have, the harder it may actually be to secure it. You got to look at transactions integrity. The more different ways you have running a transaction, again, the harder. So there are real economies of scale opportunity there. Identity and access control is a key element of this. And I think there's a movement that's fairly early, starting with W3C, to get that under control as it relates to web services and cloud services. I think apps management and patch management is also much more complicated the more times you're trying to manage those apps and deploy those patches. And then COOP, I think, is one thing that is the counter, that the more distributed you can make it. I think this is why Akamai went through the government in about 3 months. The government never procures anything in less than years, except for Akamai, because for COOP, when everybody started to do denial of service attacks on the federal government, it was a great way to distribute static content and provide us COOP. And so I think those are some of the counterbalancing factors. Now, when we talk about collaborative apps, things are going to change, because then you're going to start to look not just at the things that I talked about, but the gaming, the diversion, the ability to distort data that works into that. And I'm not sure, I certainly don't have the answers. I'm not sure we've got it as a community yet.
Okay, let's take another question.
Hi, this has been fascinating. I wanted to just follow up on one of the later remarks from the gentleman from Yahoo. And what guidance might you all be able to offer to an organization that doesn't have the wherewithal to have its own cloud, but wants to go shopping to outsource a cloud, but you have geographic limitations? I need to keep Swiss data in Switzerland, or data within the US, or out of China, or whatever my limitation are. What guidance might you be able to offer for how to shop for cloud services, but not create your own cloud because you're not as rich as Yahoo is.
And Michael, it's not fair to just say buy Yahoo.
Well, you could. And I do have some order
could,
forms
but I
if you're...
appreciate the suggestion.
Picking a cloud service vendor, actually, I've never done it. I've never considered it. So, you know, let's take it from there. What would I be looking for? One, a vendor that I could trust, a vendor that I would have a relationship, and a vendor that would still be around tomorrow. I think you're seeing a lot of startups that are saying we can do this. Well, can they really? Do they have the balance sheet? Do they have the technical staff? Do they have the wherewithal to do it? So what I would do is carefully look at what what your goals of getting into cloud computing are. And getting into it just for the sake of getting into it, probably not a good idea, but if you've got something that really makes sense, good example, maybe we should sit together.
I know.
You know, maybe like a CRM system or an SFA type system, then absolutely, you know, they're ideal candidates for it. It's just know your business and make sure you pick a damn good partner.
Yeah. Could I add to that real quick? So, have I got a solution for you?
Hey, I got the sale
that's right. You did. We'll give a referral fee.
Private.
No, so very, very interesting subject because in the European Union, you could go from Switzerland, Germany to England, all different models of privacy and data protection and so on. But what we've done is we've worked with a number of customers in this particular area who want a global process. Right, that process can live in Salesforce, it can live in Yahoo, it can live somewhere where the automation is protected and so on, but it's a global process. The data itself can be resident in country, in their own database. So you do an integration back to that service. The data may traverse through an encrypted transaction, be processed, but the data is always stored in country. And that's how we've gotten around that. So we have a lot of expertise in solving those type of issues, but it is definitely something that we have had to overcome because of the privacy and data laws.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Yes, I'm Kishore. I'm from Monster. I have a couple of questions. One primarily on between the public, private cloud, and the hybrid cloud that we had talked about. Now, where do you see that headed? In the sense, where do you see the most growth? Or would it be a combination of it, or would it be mainly in the private cloud because of the security concerns? What's your take on where you think we're headed?
Make a choice. So I'm going to start with you on this one. Make a choice. Is it more growth in public or more growth in private?
For us, it's private. It's evolving our private cloud with opportunistic public cloud. We will take applications in the public cloud that make sense for us, that give us value, agility. Otherwise, it's really continuing to evolve our existing infrastructure into the private cloud. So squarely focused on that.
I would agree with. We have a roadmap out to the end of 2013, which is expansion of our cloud services. And so we've got applications that have come up that have been developed and deployed on the cloud, but now we're looping back and taking some of our legacy applications and converting them to the cloud. So we have a clear growth path through 2013.
Mark, okay.
I think in government, we have a dichotomy. The policy desire is the public cloud. The CIO and the IT spend desire is the private cloud control.
Mm-hmm. So, what we absolutely want to do is provide options to CIOs to make that decision. We're going to accelerate our public cloud because we believe in that, but we're going to have the integration, the native integration and the capabilities to tie back to the private cloud. That's why we're partnering with EMC as well as other companies and give the CIO the option of where does that application need to live and what is the requirement that needs to be solved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last question here.
Thank you. So I'm Eric Sebesta, the Chief Technology Officer with Cloud Technology Partners, and we're helping folks do exactly this.
I know you.
I've heard a lot on the panel about sort of switching the application stack over to cloud. What are the right solutions to move in that direction? I've heard about some of the infrastructure switches to cloud to gain efficiency. The third part of the equation is organizational transformation. And we help companies with that. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what are the organizational transformation steps that need to happen to make switching to cloud successful?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, so I alluded to that at the very beginning. It really, as you mentioned, it's a people issue. It's a change management around the organization and giving people the ability to know that they have career opportunities in this transformation and making them highly successful in that. Because this is an enabling technology. This is the technology that will benefit IT in a very strategic way. And the way that we did the transformation internally, even though I'm from Salesforce, we went through the same transformation and growing pains that any organization would go through. We had, expert level Java people. We had expert level application server people. All of these individuals were going to be developing applications that leverage nothing of those skills. How do you make that happen? What it is, it's about partnering, again, setting your priorities of what you're trying to achieve, working with the business, showing the quick success. Use the virtues of the cloud. Start with small pilots. Bring in people who want to work with the business and build out those proof of concepts and show success. And then let that momentum start to drive your change. But you've got to have people understand there is tremendous career opportunity with this transformation.
I completely agree with that perspective. I think it's a huge opportunity. But there's a fear in people within the IT organizations that jobs are going to get, quote unquote, outsourced into the cloud. There's a sense of that. But I'd say to you that we see new roles evolving. For example, cloud architects. We don't have a cloud architect role. I've got apps architects, I've got infrastructure architects, I've got security architects. We're creating a role that says app architect that cuts across the entire life cycle from concept to run. We're looking at process engineers, okay, within the command center, which means you're looking at the entire, where does the network begin, where does storage end, where does storage begin, where does security end? It gets nebulous, it gets fuzzy. New roles coming up in that space. So, we talk about provisioning, right? Oh, it's self-service. You can provision stuff. The user can provision it. Well, if you don't provision behind the scenes, right, you're going to kill your cloud, right? So you've got to go deep and wide. So some skills will evolve and get deeper. Some will be new roles that will widen. And some will morph over time. Clearly, I think there's a few that will probably, like your point, Greg, they will disappear. But I think it's incredible opportunity, and as an industry, as a community, we have to make sure our people understand that it is exactly that, an opportunity and not so much of a threat that it's made out to be, or there's a sense of.
So,
and with that, we've hit the time.
oh, okay.
Michael, I'll let you get the last word. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so we had the reverse. Yahoo is about 15,000 strong, and probably 11,000 of those are developers, technicians, scientists, and their embracement of the cloud was overwhelming. And it was really, we need to put some process in place because everybody can't just jump out there day one. And so you've got applications that run on different versions of operating system. Well, if you're going to have an efficient cloud, you need a common hardware set, a common operating set. So it was the biggest transformation there was putting the processes in place and tamping down somewhat the enthusiasm to be able to make it a controlled migration as opposed to just one big free-for-all. So,
thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Thank you for the question. Gentlemen, I am an analyst, and by definition, that means it's hard for me to shut up. But I've enjoyed the conversation and listening to you guys. I could listen to you for the rest of the day. I hope that the audience has gotten something out of this you can take with you. I want to thank my panelists, Sanjay, Michael, Mark, and Trey. Thank you for joining me, and thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.